In the history of Israel, there was a turbulent era, the period of the judges. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. Conflict was constant, faith was neglected, and the people were disheartened. They often turned away from the ways of God and fell into the worship of idols. Yet, in this dark and chaotic time, God wove a breathtaking story of redemption in an ordinary family. This story is recorded in the book of Ruth. Though it seems ordinary, it holds God's deepest grace and most perfect plan. Across thousands of years, it still comforts those who struggle in suffering and press forward in confusion. The story begins with a sudden famine. A severe drought struck the region of Judah. The land was parched, crops failed, and people suffered greatly, forced to flee for survival. In Bethlehem of Judah lived a man named Elimelech, a descendant of the tribe of Judah. He had a happy family, his wife Naomi, and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Watching his family's food supply dwindle and seeing the hunger on his wife's and children's faces, Elimelech was filled with anxiety. He knew that if things continued, his whole family would starve in Bethlehem. After much struggle, Elimelech decided to take his family away from their homeland to live in Moab. Moab, a neighboring nation of Israel, was not affected by the famine. Its land was fertile and full of grain. In those days, the Moabites were enemies of Israel. They worshipped idols and did evil, and God had commanded the Israelites not to intermarry with them or associate with them. But driven by hardship, Elimelech set aside God's command and led his family on the journey to Moab. He thought this was the only way to save his family, not knowing that this path would bring unexpected suffering and also lead his family into God's wonderful providence. After arriving in Moab, the family settled with difficulty, earning a living by farming and labor. Yet hardship did not end. Elimelech, the head of the family, died suddenly, leaving Naomi to raise their two sons alone. As time passed, Mahlon and Chilion grew up. Naomi allowed them to marry two Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. The two daughters-in-law were kind and loyal, treating Naomi as their own mother. Though poor, the family found warmth, and Naomi slowly recovered from her grief, hoping for a peaceful life. Then disaster struck again. Mahlon and Chilion both died. Naomi fell into complete despair. From a blessed woman, she became a lonely widow, with only two Moabite daughters-in-law who had also lost their husbands. Looking at her young daughters-in-law, Naomi felt deep guilt and decided to send them back to their own families to find new homes. Early one morning, with tears in her eyes, Naomi urged them, "Go back, my daughters. Your husbands are gone, and I cannot support you. May the Lord show kindness to you, that you may find rest in the homes of your new husbands." Though Orpah was reluctant, she finally bowed in farewell and returned to her family, never to come back. But Ruth made an astonishing decision. Clinging to Naomi, she said firmly, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also if anything but death parts me from you." Ruth was a Moabite woman, raised worshiping idols. But through living with Naomi, she was touched by her kindness and perseverance, and drawn to the grace of the Lord God. She gave up her homeland, relatives, and the chance to remarry, determined to return to Israel with Naomi and serve her God. Naomi was deeply moved. Holding Ruth's hand, they set off for Bethlehem during the barley harvest, praying silently for God's favor. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the people were amazed to see Naomi return. But she said, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty." With nothing left, the two women survived by gleaning the leftover grain from the fields, a law God had given to Israel, to leave grain for the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner. Every morning Ruth rose early to glean in the fields until evening, then returned home to grind flour and bake bread for Naomi. She was hardworking and humble, never lazy or greedy, knowing this was God's grace. By chance, the field where she gleaned belonged to Boaz, a wealthy and God-fearing man of Bethlehem. Boaz was upright and kind, always showing mercy to the helpless. When he saw Ruth's diligence and humility, he asked his servants about her. Moved by her story, he went to Ruth and said gently, "My daughter, do not go to glean in another field. Stay here with my young women. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. When you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars that the young men have filled." Ruth bowed down in gratitude. Boaz smiled and said, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land, and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done." From then on, Ruth gleaned in Boaz's field. His servants left generous bundles of grain for her, and Boaz invited her to eat with him at lunch, so she was well fed. Ruth told Naomi everything, and Naomi thanked God deeply, praying that he would prepare a home for Ruth. When the harvest ended, the two women faced hardship again. Naomi remembered Israel's custom of the kinsman redeemer. If a man died without children, his close relative had the duty to marry his widow and preserve the family line. Boaz was a close relative of Elimelech and the rightful kinsman redeemer for Ruth. So she instructed Ruth to go to Boaz's threshing floor that night, lie at his feet, and wait for his guidance. That night, Boaz was resting on the threshing floor. When he woke and found someone at his feet, he asked who it was. Ruth bowed and said, "I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." Boaz was deeply moved. He told Ruth there was a closer relative, and he must first ask that man's willingness. If the man refused, Boaz himself would fulfill the duty of redeemer and marry her. The next morning, Boaz gathered the elders and people at the city gate and spoke to the closer relative. Fearing for his own property, the man refused. Boaz rejoiced and declared to all, "I will marry Ruth, to care for her and Naomi, to preserve the name of the deceased. May the Lord bless this deed." The elders and people blessed them. Soon after, Boaz married Ruth. Their wedding was simple, yet full of God's grace and the people's blessing. Boaz loved Ruth tenderly and honored Naomi as his own mother. At last, Naomi was freed from loneliness and overflowed with gratitude for God's redemption. Not long after, Ruth gave birth to a son named Obed. The people rejoiced with Naomi, and she cared for Obed as her own grandson. Obed grew up fearing God and later became the grandfather of King David and an ancestor of Jesus Christ. Naomi lived out her years in peace under the care of Boaz and Ruth. Ruth and Boaz had many children, and their household prospered, becoming the most respected family in Bethlehem. This Moabite woman, once a foreign widow, became a vessel chosen by God, her story one of the most touching testimonies of grace in the Bible. This story may seem like an ordinary love story, a simple family redemption. In truth, it holds God's profound truths and perfect grace. Ruth's loyalty, humility, and obedience. Boaz's kindness, integrity, and reverence for God. Naomi's perseverance, gratitude, and trust all are worthy of our imitation. Ruth was a foreigner who once did not know God. Yet through her loyalty to her mother-in-law and her longing for God, she was chosen and blessed. Boaz was a wealthy man, yet because he feared God and showed mercy to the helpless, he became Ruth's redeemer and received God's blessing. Naomi suffered greatly, losing her husband and sons, yet by trusting God and not giving up hope, she finally received God's grace and lived in peace. This story shows us that God's grace never fails. No matter what hardship you face, no matter who you are or where you come from, if you are willing to trust God, obey Him, and live with love and faithfulness, God will surely care for you and prepare the very best plan. God's redemption has no boundaries of race, status, or past. All who come to Him will be accepted, forgiven, and given new life and eternal grace. Like Ruth, You may not have a perfect past or a noble status, yet with a sincere, loyal, and obedient heart, you can be lifted up by God and become an eternal testimony. Today, we too may face suffering, confusion, and loss. We may feel small, unworthy, and inadequate. But remember, God's grace is sufficient for you, and His plans are always good. If you follow God faithfully, as Ruth did, He will lead you out of trouble and into your own redemption and grace, so that your life may shine as a testimony to His glory.